That intentionality piece is, I think, what drives it home for the kids. These children might not be called children anymore.
I think there's been some strides now in terms of education and in schools where they're bringing in personal financing.
These are experiences that maybe we don't realize, but they mean so much to them. Everything that was happening with people's lives, once things settle down a little,
Sometimes things go up and sometimes things go down.
that was such a gratifying experience to me. Hello and welcome everyone to Express Yourself podcast. We're your hosts, Vanessa Martinez.
And I'm Lauren Jenuardi, and we're coming to you to answer questions that have come in from our clients or from other listeners.
What we're going to try to do is not only get you those answers, either from our resources or ourselves or experiences that we've had, but also try to put a real life spin to it to kind of make finance a little more digestible.
Absolutely. So the question for Vanessa today is, when do I start talking to my children about finances?
We get this question quite often, and I think it has to really depend on your sometimes relationship with your children. I would say it could start from the moment they start learning their numbers, right? So 1 + 1 is 2. And as much as you might think that that's not financial, it definitely is. Yes. Right. And deducting pieces, right? That's still a part of finance. But when you get into the real nitty gritty of finances and more of structural budgeting pieces, let's say, this is where it's a real sit down conversation and it needs to be intentional. Yes. That intentionality piece is, I think, what drives it home for the kids. Yes. Yes. We had a couple come in and they brought their children. They made them break their piggy banks. So they had multiple piggy banks where they had all this cash that they had saved for many years. And it was quite a bit of money. And the parents hadn't thought through also knowing that this was just in their closet.
Sure.
But one of the kids was very particular that he wanted to go into the bank and see how much was getting deposited.
Nice.
And then brought back in and sat down and had a conversation. So in some cases, it might be, when do you start talking to your kids? And that could be when you're ready and you just bring in gentle pieces of finance.
Yeah.
Like building an allowance. What does that mean? Do we have goals set for that? And when it's younger generations, in this case, this family preferred that we did it. So they brought the children into us and we had a conversation showing them what this meant. What is a stock? What is the stock market? Right. So it was a wonderful conversations. The kids loved it. And we're going to do this on a quarterly basis with the kids and the parents. So if you need help, reach out to your financial advisor and ask them if they can help with this process if you don't want to, or you feel that you can learn from that experience. As kids get older, though, so now there's, when do I kind of pass that legacy on to my children? Yeah, right now these children might not be called children anymore when they're 40s or 50s. And how do you talk through that conversation? So that's a deeper conversation on the partners, or the matriarch and patriarch should have that conversation first and have kind of like a pre-meeting before they actually sit with the next gen to have a deeper conversation there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it ties into how do you teach them financial literacy as well? I know it was not really something that I was taught growing up. And I think there's been some strides now in terms of education and in schools where they're bringing in personal financing kind of conversations, but it definitely wasn't a part of anything when I went to school. So you kind of take for granted that your children know some things that they really don't know. And our kids are similarly aged. And I will say, like, my oldest son, Luca, came to me and he was like, "How much did you and dad pay for this house?" And I was like, "Hey, that's a little bit rude, number one. Like, who are you talking to and who are you telling this information to?" And then I had to kind of check myself and be like, all right, like, let's back this up. What can we learn from this? And so I said to him, okay, I said, this is how much dad and I paid for the house. And he said, oh, okay. He's like, so you like wrote a check? And I said, no. I'm like, that's not how home buying goes for the majority of families, right? Most people at some point in your life, you probably had a mortgage, and you have a down payment. So then I walked through and I was like, okay, this is a good teaching opportunity for him. And so we walked through like, hey, this is a down payment. And so dad and I saved this money and we put it down on the house. And then we got a mortgage and we pay every month. And then I got a little bit more judgment that the house wasn't fully paid off. And I was like, hey, mortgages have terms and you could do 15, 20, 30, blah, blah. We kind of went to a deep dive on mortgages. But it was a good learning opportunity because he didn't even realize that. And I realized, like, my parents never talked to me about that. Like, when we went to buy our first house, that was okay, that's kind of when I was learning. And I have obviously learned some during college, but that's the first time it was really put into practice. So for me, kind of taking those random off the wall questions that they ask, and really, how can I turn this into a learning opportunity?
I think diving deep into those questions is the opportunity. So we might say when is a good time, but it's all the time. Yes, that's the final answer. The final answer is you can talk to your kids about finance all the time because almost every decision we make ties to finance. So even if it's going to the grocery store, let's do a quick game. We make a grocery list. We can even add the game of how much will this cost.
Yes.
And make that list for them. These are experiences that maybe we don't realize, but they mean so much to them.
Yes.
And they'll share this experience later.
Probably.
As they become adults, they're going to be like, my mom used to take me to the grocery store and we play the game on how much everything was going to cost. And then that starts building that knowledge in them.
Absolutely.
I know that, let's be honest, we have an advantage because we're in this field.
Yes.
That we can dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
But I think that as parents, if we're truly interested in having this be something that we pass on to our children, taking the time to do a quick read. There's so many good books out there that you can either share with your kids when they're younger or that you can kind of digest and understand. I think that is the biggest step that I think we've both done with our kids. Simple questions that might be simple to us and not for the general public.
Correct.
Right.
Right. I know. Have you ever gotten questions about investing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How did those conversations go?
It was more understanding. So this was during COVID. And obviously the market was a little wild right in the beginning.
Yeah.
And everything that was happening with people's lives. Once things settled down a little, Bella, that's my youngest, understands a little bit more.
Sure.
And she was like, well, does that mean that all stocks will be bad? And then I was like, no, it doesn't. There's always opportunities.
Yep.
And then I threw it back to her. Where do you see opportunities? What is still happening today that will happen tomorrow, no matter what? Yep. And she was like, well, I got to eat out. And then I was like, perfect example.
I love it. She's practical.
Yes. She was like, I have to eat. And she was like, so if we go to Jewel, and then I explained Jewel is Albertsons, the stock name.
Yep.
And then she was like, I want you to buy me that stock, Mom. Okay. So that was kind of our first step in. And she would watch it. She downloaded the little thing on it and she would watch it on her, back then, on her tablet, because she didn't have a phone yet. Oh my God. She'd watch it. And that was such a gratifying experience to me.
Yes.
That she'd ask these things. And I think that happens to our children. They ask certain questions, and maybe if we just dive a little deeper, we can.
Yes. I know. So maybe I dove in a little bit too deep. No, but I both boys were kind of poking around and we're like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, this is basically what I do. I help families in this way and I help them manage their money. And I kind of went into some stocks and they were like, well, we've heard a little bit about stocks at school. I was like, great. I'm impressed. Number one, Hanks is fifth and seventh grade and you're starting to talk about this. Super impressed. And so we kind of dove in and I took it a step farther, which maybe not everybody wants to do, but I basically said like, "Hey, I'm going to show you one of my investment accounts and I want you to see it. And I want you to see all these different things. And sometimes things go up and sometimes things go down. And, they fluctuate, that this is kind of what we're trying to achieve a goal and we keep a strategy in mind." And I started to talk about asset allocation, which was probably too deep. And I was like, "Hey, there's a mixture of stocks and bonds, and this is why I do what I do." Um, and it was interesting because my oldest son, Luca, his reaction was like, "Cool, I want to start picking some stocks. Great." And then my younger son, Gabriel, was like, "Well," he likes to hang out with mom. So he was like, "I think maybe I'm going to become an advisor because I want to work with you." And so, however you get them into the industry, however you have kind of a conversation with your family, just kind of be open to exploring their questions and diving deeper in your answers.
Yeah. And we completely get it that life does get complicated. So sometimes, or we might not find that time to kind of dive deeper in the topic, but just give it a minute, look for the next opportunity, or create that opportunity with intentionality to be able to share and teach them. And remember, if you have questions, send them in. We'd be glad to help. Thank you. See you next week. Be well.